कल्मषापहं श्रवणमंगलं श्रीमदाततं भुवि गृह्णन्ति ये भूरिदा जनाः. So today is a very auspicious day, 12th January. In 1863, Swami Vivekananda was born on this day according to the English calendar. Of course, we will be celebrating Swami Vivekananda's birthday on the 19th, because his birthday according to the Hindu calendar is on 17th of this month. So as usual, we'll be having puja in the afternoon at about 4 p.m. and before that in the morning the songs, bhajans, and there will be talks and discussions on Swamiji. Whoever, a lot of children are expected, so they will be reading from the life and message of Swamiji, and there will be a lot of bhajans, and then followed by prasad as usual afternoon at 12:30, and then we'll have our sessions which will begin from 2:30 or 3. Some bhajans will be there. So all are welcome on 19th. So today we continue from where we left last time. Sri Ramakrishna is explaining to Pratap and the other devotees. Just towards the end of our last class, we heard a beautiful song where Sri Ramakrishna is asking everybody, especially the Brahmos who are asking questions, to dive deep and not remain at the surface. Dive deep in the ocean of God's name. So then in that context, Narendra, he is mentioning about Naren, who has just started coming. Narendra is Swami Vivekananda, as you know. So the other people, of course, perhaps were not aware of who he was. So they asked the question, who is Narendra? In the previous class we just saw, Pratap is asking, who is Narendra? So I said this to Narendra, then he said, who is this Narendra? Then Sri Ramakrishna is explaining. We continue from there. Oh, he is a young man, I said to him. Look here, God is a sea of nectar. I mean, a few days ago, perhaps Naren had come there, and Thakur was explaining, Sri Ramakrishna was explaining to Narendra, telling him, look here, God is a sea of nectar, Amruta. Don't you want to dive into that sea? And just imagine a bowl of nectar and you are a fly. Where will you sit to drink the nectar? So Narendra says, I will sit on the edge of the bowl and sip, leaning over it. Because if you fall inside, the fly may get drowned. So that is a logical thing to say. I asked, Sri Ramakrishna is saying, I asked, why sit on the edge? He said, if I go further, I shall be drowned and lose my life. Then I said, Sri Ramakrishna is saying, my boy, there is no danger in the sea of Satchidananda. It is the sea of immortality. By diving into this sea, nobody dies, but instead becomes immortal. One does not lose one's head by being mad for God. So this is what Sri Ramakrishna is trying to explain to us, that there is a huge difference between the gross material world which we see and the subtle world. Things don't follow the same principle, though this was just given as a simile, just to explain to Swami Vivekananda what happens when the mind drowns in Satchidananda. So naturally the fear is, if we lose our individuality, the mind may totally get drowned and we may lose our individuality. That was the questions many people asked Swamiji in England and America, in the West. What happens if we go beyond the mind? Will we not lose this precious mind with which we are in contact with the world? Will we not become unconscious? So that was a natural doubt, because this idea of transcending the mind and becoming one with the spirit does not exist in Western philosophy. So for them, the idea of soul is itself the idea of the mind. Mind means soul. you don't have a tripartite existence, body, mind and soul. That is what Vedanta says. Soul is something, the substratum, Satchidananda, on which this play of Maya is seen, or maybe the whole material world and the subtle and the gross world and the causal world, Karana Shariras of all the Jivas, they are playing. So this play can go on, will go on, as long as you have the identification with these three bodies, Sukshma, Sthula and Karana Sharira. So once that identification goes and you drown yourself, I mean you become merged in the ocean of Satchidananda, you actually do not lose your individuality, but your individuality expands to such a length that you become one with that and you don't lose one's head. So you can't compare, though it is given as an example, a gross fly trying to sip from the ocean of Satchidananda, which Sri Ramakrishna was trying to explain to Narendra. By doing that, you don't, once you take a sip and even if you drown inside that, you will not die as the fly dies if it sinks in the syrup in the ocean of Satchidananda, the bowl of Satchidananda. So then he is continuing his conversation. He says, I and mine, this is ignorance. Now, to give examples, he is saying, for example, Rani Rasmani built this temple. And of course, she was humble enough and she never said that I built this temple. She never went on boasting like that, because she knew it was the Divine Mother who made her do all these things. But people say Rasmanir Mandir. Normally they don't say Ma Kali Mandir. For example, you have a lot of temples in India which were built by Birla, the philanthropist Birla. Mostly they are Lakshmi Narayan temples. But very often if you ask for directions, they will say there is a Birla temple there. Of course, that doesn't mean that Birla is the deity there. The deity is Lakshmi Narayan, but built by Birla. So also perhaps in Bengal at that time, because it was such a huge temple, they used to say Rasmanir's temple, Rasmanir Mandir. So he says, nobody says God built it. Means God was, Rani Rasmani was just instrumental. It was really God's will or Mother's will that built it. Everybody says this, that is Rasmani built the temple or it is Rasmani's temple, Kali temple at the most. So and so founded the Brahmo Samaj. Everybody says so. Like Keshav Chandra Sen or Raja Ram Mohan Roy and others started the Brahmo Samaj. Nobody says that it came into being by the will of God. So I am the doer. Somebody, if he claims that he does all these things, then he is still ignorant, he is not realized God. That is the idea. O Lord, you are the doer, I do nothing. You are the operator, I am the machine. This is knowledge. So this was the meaning of the song which we heard when we heard the song Sakali Tomar Ichha. That was the song where Sri Ramakrishna was singing that song, saying that it is the mother who runs this chariot. And we think that we are running the chariot. Sakali Tomar Ichha. I am the machine, you are the operator. This is knowledge. O Lord, nothing is mine. This temple is not mine. The Kali temple is not mine. The Samaj is not mine. These are all yours. Wife, son, family, none of this is mine. They are all yours. This is knowledge. So with this kind of knowledge, if one lives in the world, now Sri Ramakrishna will give that example, how to live in this world like a maid servant works in the house of a rich person. That is how Sri Ramakrishna is explaining how one can live in this world with detachment if we give up this small I and think that it is the Lord's wish or the Lord's word, where we have come as we have come to a foreign place on a journey. And then we, as long as we have our roles to play, we are here and we go back from where we came. So that is the idea. The wife, son, family, none of this is mine. They are all yours. This is knowledge. But people say, this is mine, it belongs to me. Loving all such objects as your own is Maya, but loving all things is compassion. I mentioned a few in the last class that Swami Vivekananda defined that in the melody of this universe, the universe is like, he compared it to a big melody, and he said there are three main notes which comprise the music or the melody of this universe. And he said freedom, sameness and strength. Freedom, strength and sameness constitute the three notes which comprise the melody of this universe. He says if you have these three things and in proper proportion, or maybe if these are the notes which actually go on to make the universal melody sweet. So here he says compassion by loving all things, that is where sameness comes. It's not because it is mine, it is good. Everything, loving all things equally, or maybe loving all things because they have come from God, they have the same origin, it's a creation of God. That is compassion, daya. And loving certain people whom we like is known as Maya. So that is how Sri Ramakrishna in his own simple way is explaining to us, this is mine because it belongs to me, it is Maya. But if you have a compassion towards all, loving all things equally, if that sameness has been developed in us, then it is known as daya. So that is the difference between compassion, daya or Maya, which he is explaining. I love only the members of the Brahmo Samaj, or I love only my family, that is Maya. To love your compatriots, only your compatriots, he is telling this to Pratap because he was soon going to take a very big responsibility of handling the Brahmo Samaj. And that's why he said, I am quite busy these days, I have to do this, I have to do that. So Sri Ramakrishna knew that he is a genuine soul, so he needs a little bit of advice, not to be too much involved in the organization, thinking that this is mine and without me this organization will suffer and all those things. So he says just to think all your compatriots or all your followers of this Brahmo Samaj alone are mine, that is Maya. To love people of all countries, you see how broad Swamiji is. To love people of all countries, to love followers of all religions comes from the love of God, from compassion, from daya, not from Maya. Maya binds man, it takes one away from God. Compassion leads one towards him. Shukadeva and Narada. Shukadeva is the one who wrote Bhagavata, who recited the Bhagavata in fact to Parikshit, the king, who was told that he will die within 7 days. So he had very little time. In those 7 days, he explained the whole Leela, the divine play of Sri Krishna, and that is how Bhagavatam came into existence. So Shukadeva and Narada, who of course Narada was also supposed to be one who brought the concept of prema or divine love and used to constantly, eternally spread it among the people. So Narada was famous for that, though he had no need to do that. As if you remember, Sri Ramakrishna had once classified people into 4 categories. He had said the Baddha Jivas who are bound to this world, and then there are some aspirants who are mumukshus, who want to be free from this world, some jivas who want freedom. So those are mumukshus, but many of them, and he compared them, he said a fisherman casts his net and manages to catch a few fish, but some of the fishes don't fall into the net. He gave that example. Some fishes somehow very cleverly, whenever the net is thrown at them, they somehow manage to escape. So they are the Nitya Muktas. So he used to say Shukadeva and Narada are examples of Nitya Muktas, though they are not born because of their karma, but yet they go on doing karma, they go on speaking about God before humanity, so that they benefit from that. So they had compassion. So only people who have realized themselves as Brahman can have this compassion or sameness. because as Swamiji said, they have freedom, they have the strength to withstand everything, and also they have the both the physical and mental strength to live in this world, and also compassion or sameness. So, this sameness leads to compassion, and Shukadeva and Narada both were Nitya Muktas who are never bound, who only come with incarnations or who work independently now and then. They come to this world, or they are in this world to give knowledge or bhakti, a divine love, as in the case of Narada through his Bhakti Sutras. Narada also was constantly preaching the importance of repeating the sacred name of the Lord. So, both Shukadeva and Narada had compassion. Now, we come to chapter 8, where instructions are given to Pratap, especially because he is going to lead the Brahmo Samaj. He is going to be one of the important leaders. And the topic, though the conversations are going on, M has given a separate heading, instructions to Pratap and lust and greed. So, these are the topics which will be discussed, and then the subheading is spiritual practice in the family. So, Pratap is asking, sir, those who come to you, are they making progress gradually? Because he wants to know that if people are bound souls, then what is the way? Those who are Baddha Jiva or who are totally bound, they will never feel the urge to even think about spirituality, leave alone practicing the spirituality. But he says, sir, those who come to you, by some reason they have felt the need to practice spirituality, who are mumukshus, who are the aspirants. They are not Nitya Muktas like Narada and Shuka, but they have come with the hope of getting freedom, but still they do not know the way. So, he says, those who come to you, are they progressing gradually or are they not? Sri Ramakrishna says, there is no harm in leading a family life. He understood, he is asking a question on behalf of the householders who cannot make immediate progress, as Sri Ramakrishna just mentioned. They have that desire to be free. So, are they making progress gradually? That is the question. There is no harm in leading a family life, but you have to live in the family like a maid servant. Now, he is giving another example. He explained the difference between Maya and Daya and showed that if you have compassion, then you can live in this world properly with the attitude of sameness, compassion towards all. But if you have Maya, you will get bound, because this I and mine, it restricts your relationship to only those whom you think are your own. So, if it is a very selfish I, it will be restricted only to I, meaning my family. If it is slightly enlarged, the I becomes, it includes me, my family, my relatives, and maybe a bigger circle. It may be a slightly bigger circle than one's own family. So, he is more unselfish. But if that I increases still further, then it may encompass all the people in the nation. He may say that I love my nation and I will do everything I can to help my nation. So, that idea of nationhood or national belonging to a nation is a slightly higher I. So, that way it goes on expanding. Then he says, I care for people who are suffering, which is a huge, irrespective of whichever nation they belong to. There are some people who believe in that, and then they work for that. So, the I goes on expanding, but true compassion is when you start feeling that everyone is your own, as Sri Ramakrishna said towards the end of the conversation, saying that loving everybody is sameness, irrespective of his or her nationality or religion or creed and other things. So, he says, but how to practice that? How to get that kind of detachment so that one can have compassion and not Maya. Otherwise, that I and mine feeling is very difficult to go, especially when you are living in a family. So he gives a very good solution, saying that you can live in the family like a maid servant. Now, how to practice spirituality in the family, spiritual practice in the family, that is the next topic. The conversation is going on. The maid servant refers to her master's house as our house. Though she has her own home in another village, she sees the master's house. The moment she sees our house. Now, that is what Sri Ramakrishna is trying to explain, that just as a maid servant, though she knows fully well that this house is not mine, the house where I am serving, I am employed, I have just come here because I get my salary, I am working there. So, her own home is in the village. Again she rears her master's son and says, my Hari has become naughty, my Hari doesn't like sweets. So, she doesn't that my and I and that mine are there, but it is only a semblance of that I and mine. It is there as long as she is in the house working as a maid servant. But at the same time, she knows fully well that this I and mine are not permanent, they are temporary. So, that is the kind of feeling one should have when we live in this world. Sri Ramakrishna gives such a wonderful psychological tool for us, that it may be that we may have to assume this I and mine, otherwise how can we work? The maid servant cannot possibly work if she is totally disinterested. She just comes and does not care for the family, or does not feel for some time at least that this is my house. Then she will take more care, do the work properly, look after Hari, somebody's son as her own son, and give him, he doesn't like sweets and all those things. And though she says my Hari, she knows that Hari is not hers, he is her master's son, whom I am supposed to, whose care I am supposed to take. Now, therefore, I say to those who come here, why not live a family life? There is no harm in it. But fix your mind in God while living a householder's life, just as that maid servant knew that her real house is somewhere else. If we feel that we really belong to God and we are His children, whereas the role which we are playing is a temporary one, like the housemaid's role in the rich man's house, then there is no harm. But fix your mind in God while living a householder's life. Know that the house and the family are not yours. They are all God's. My real home is with God. And I also say to them, pray earnestly for love and devotion at His holy feet. So, how to work and how to develop that love? If we pray for bhakti, for devotion and love and devotion at His lotus feet, then this is possible, this kind of detachment. Because if you don't have an attachment for something higher, then you cannot have detachment for the lower. But at the same time, he is not asking you to detach as this. He just says that you have that same kind of attachment, but have a higher attachment for God. Just having a higher attachment prevents you from having a deep attachment towards whom you consider to be your own. Just as the maid servant, she has definitely attachment towards the people whom she is serving. The son she is considering as her own, but her own son is in the house, whom she loves much more. She knows fully well that they are my real children, the house in the village where she comes from. So also, my relationship with God, whatever relationship, bhava it may be, is more permanent and more sustainable and more permanent, eternal. In that relation, if we develop by prayer and pray earnestly for love and devotion at His lotus feet, then this relationship, though it is there, this relationship which we assume for ourselves in the household, it does not harm us. The relationship is still there, but it is just like the maid servant's relationship with her masters, the master's children, the master's family, and the master's house. So he says, but the conversation again turns to foreign countries. As you know, Pratap has just come back from a tour of England and America. So naturally, he is hearing all these things, but still he has a very strong judgment and perhaps this is how we see other countries. This is an ideal lesson here, where a wrong understanding can, if we are biased and if we just visit with some prejudice. So, Pratap has gone as with a feeling that we are an enslaved nation and thinks everything in India is good, whereas everything in the West is all material and all those things. So, he has gone with that conclusion before even trying to understand in depth the nature of the people, whether they are from the West or East, is not very different. There are good people in the West, there are good people in the East. So, that ignorance is shown here, and devotee says, sir, these days learned men of the West don't even accept the existence of God. I mean, you should remember that when this gospel was being recorded, England was passing through a phase where modern science was delivering death blows to people who believed in some kind of organized religion. I don't know whether they would have criticized true spirituality, but religion as it was practiced, which did not satisfy the rational intellect, was not in favor. So, lot of scientists and lot of people who believed in the methods of science, the methods which were used in science were very experimental verification of whatever you propose. It is not that a scientist will accept anything and everything that somebody proposes as a hypothesis. He has to prove it in the laboratory, experiment with it, and when the truth is verified, then he accepts it as a theory or as a proof, a proved statement which he thinks is, which he calls a law. So, that method, when they tried to explain religion with the help of that scientific approach to truth, that love for truth which they had, they found that religion is lacking in all these things. So, naturally they were not satisfied with the answers given by the clergymen and the people who were in charge of religion. They could not explain spirituality as Sri Ramakrishna is explaining in a very scientific way. So, this scientific approach to religion was missing. So, naturally they did not believe except the existence of God. And the same reaction you will find with Narendra also, when he asked all the people, the so called religious people of Calcutta, which was a big mixture of Christians, Brahmos, and then we had our lot of Hindu sects leaders, and to everyone he would ask the same question, which he would perhaps ask a professor of science or physics or chemistry or mathematics. He says, have you seen God? Have you perceived these things as true? Have you had direct perception? So, if the answer was negative, then his scientific mind would not accept that as true. So, Naren's state of mind at that stage was exactly what learned people of the West had. So, Sri Ramakrishna knows this fact. You see, sitting in Calcutta, being illiterate, having never seen England or America or the places where scientific thought was ruling supreme in those days, and just hearing a comment made by a devotee, very casual comment, saying that West people don't accept God as even the existence of God. So, Pratap says, of course, Pratap is trying to give the devotee some answer that it is not so bad, and Sri Ramakrishna supports them, supports that view. They may be saying that, but I don't think any of them is an atheist at heart. Many have admitted that there is some supreme power behind the affairs of the world. Now, this is what Einstein also felt. He did not, his belief in religion, the Jewish religion to which he belonged, did not permit him to be an atheist, though he was a scientist. And he also spoke of some supreme power, some unseen power, somebody who created this world. So, in a way they had their own concept. The scientists also had a concept of God. That is what Pratap is saying now. But then Sri Ramakrishna agrees with that and says it's enough if they believe in power. Power means Shakti. So, this power or the power of creation or some supreme power, whether you call the power of the cosmos, power of the atom or whatever power, there is a Shakti everywhere. That is what the Shaktas say. The God who is Satchidananda, manifests in this universe through his power of Shakti. So, this idea of power, which is animating this whole universe, which scientists accept, is nothing but the power of Shakti, which the Hindus think is one aspect of God. So, after a long, besides, Pratap says, Western scholars also believe in a moral government which rewards good actions and punishes evil ones. Because when these scientists or these Western scholars decided to say that the role of religion is insignificant in society, they knew that how can we then govern people and force them to do good, because in those days it was just some fear of hell or the desire to go to heaven that made people do good moral things. So, they knew that if we remove the fear of hell or we remove the temptation of heaven from religion, then people might like to do whatever they like, and that is one of the effects of science which we found, that scientists had no control over how science could be used for the good of humanity. If they thought science can be used for mass destruction, why not do it? Evil people, if they get hold of these things, they will do it. So, also here we will find that Pratap says they still believe, some Western scholars thought that this could be dangerous. If we remove the authority of the church or of any of the rules and maybe dogmas of organized religion, then what is the authority which will make people not sin, not do bad things, do evil things? So, a moral government was proposed where they thought, no, God is necessary, but of course, they did not accept the theory of karma. Indians can become atheists by saying that you do not have to believe in a God to give you punishment, it is your own karma. It is a law of cause and effect which every scientist accepts. So, if you tell them it is just a cause and effect, no effect can be seen without a cause. So, no moral evil action will result in a good action. It definitely has to result in something evil to you. So, if you do evil, you will get evil. If you do good, you will get good. That is the causal theory, law of cause and effect. Each reaction has an equal and opposite reaction, is action. That is what Newton's law says. So, also here the karma theory is one way of explaining, but unfortunately they did not have that theological background. So, the Western scholars, though they were deeply devoted to Christianity, but also influenced by science, they said, okay, we have a God who maintains the moral order, and that moral order is maintained by this creator. How and how he does it, that was not explained, but anyway they believed that. So, that is why after saying this, Pratap rises to leave, because he has heard whatever Thakur had to say, but Thakur still remembers. I have one last piece of advice left to give, because he loved Pratap very much. He said, what more can I tell you? I only ask you, again is repeating that, not to involve yourself in these quarrels and controversies, because he knew that in spite of his good spiritual nature, he had some administrative responsibilities in his life, and that would make him again get involved and lose his peace of mind and forget God and all those things. So, he says, what more I can tell you, whatever I had to tell you, how to lead a life in the household, everything I have told you. But at the same time, I am just asking you towards the end, before you leave, I am just asking you, warning you or cautioning you not to involve yourself in quarrels and controversies, because that will be a sure, that will surely result in lack of peace of mind, and with that kind of mind you perhaps cannot concentrate on your spiritual quest. And one more thing, he is continuing, it is lust and greed that takes a man away from God. They are obstacles to God realization. Everybody praises his own wife whether or not she is good, all laugh. So, he is just whether one's wife is good or not, if you ask what kind of a wife he has, a man will immediately say, sir, he is good indeed, she is good indeed. So, that he shows that how man is bound and made to speak untruth. There, of course, that was a question which Sri Ramakrishna often asked when married people came, because he knew without the cooperation of the wife, if both husband and wife were holy or they had the same spiritual inclination, then it becomes easy. Because most of the cases, like Kalipada Ghosh, his wife came, she was a highly devoted woman. But she came and requested Sri Ramakrishna that, see, I like to practice spirituality, but my husband always comes home drunk. Why don't you change him? She came, then Sri Ramakrishna sent her to the Holy Mother, and then Holy Mother said, no, I can't do anything, you go back. And then finally they gave her assurance that he will come around, and finally you see Kalipad Ghosh's life undergoes a transformation because of the devotion of his wife. So Sri Ramakrishna was very keen to know, especially those people who were living in the household. He asked M also. The first question he asked was, how is your wife? Is she Vidya? I mean, is she? Then unfortunately M thinks that she is asking whether she is educated or not. So she says she is okay, but she is avidya or ignorant, or she is not educated. Agyani, that is the word he used, Agyani. And then Sri Ramakrishna scolds him. That means you are a Gyani. So by just by having a degree or having passed certain exams, do you think your wife is ignorant? You are not a man of knowledge. And he gives him the correct idea of what knowledge means. So this idea he is trying to explain. So whenever such people say certain things, he would definitely ask if the spouse is helping him or her. If it was a male, he would ask, otherwise he would ask in the other way, whether they are conducive to your spiritual welfare or not. And then he says many people would not admit if that is not the case. They would simply say, yes, she is good. So then Pratap understands perhaps things were not so good in his house. But anyway, he says, may I leave now? Pratap leaves. Thakur's sweet words about renunciation of lust and gold have not ended. The leaves of the trees in Surendra's garden, now he is giving a small description. They were all in Surendra's garden house, are fluttering and murmuring in the southern breeze. All these words mix in their sound. But as they float into the infinite sky, they have struck the hearts of the devotees. But have these words resounded in Pratap's heart? Now this is what M feels, because he knew, though he was a good person, a spiritual aspirant, the pressures of the world were so much. He knew perhaps more of his background, Pratap. So he was having some doubts in his mind whether whatever Sri Ramakrishna told Pratap, I mean, he spent such a long time. We see the conversation started long ago, and after that he is now taking leave. But whether all those conversations have entered his heart, has he taken it seriously, has he assimilated them? So have these words resounded in Pratap's heart? Though intellectually he might have accepted some of the ideas, that was now the concern of M. M is sitting there, is observing all these things. Now he has become mature enough to know or to observe the impact created by Sri Ramakrishna on others, because he is getting a lot of benefit just by sitting there and watching and hearing these conversations. Maybe many of the questions which others ask are his own questions. And recreate this scene when he went home. So he has definitely recreated this scene, and that's why he can make such remarks that when I was there at that time, when Sri Ramakrishna was talking to Pratap, I had this feeling. So you can imagine how minutely he has observed not only what Sri Ramakrishna is saying, how others are reacting, and he has reported that verbatim without missing a single word. But at the same time, he has also observed his own reactions at that time, remembered those reactions, and commented, given those things in small type as comments. So we will find there are other places also where he makes elaborate remarks, because after the conversation perhaps M thought on these ideas for a very long time, especially the persons who are involved. So he used to either think of these things when he was going home back in the carriage. Many times he says, M thought for a very long time. He is just expressing what was his mental condition at that time. And he records that. That is the beauty of this Kathamrita. That it's not just a record of the conversations, but also the record of what he felt as a sadhaka, what he felt as a aspirant, a co-traveler like these other people. Many of the questions were his own. So, as a co-traveler, he must have felt certain things are applicable to him also, being in the household. So, after some time, Manilal Malik says to Thakur, "Sir, you must now depart for Dakshineshwar." So, they are in Surendra's garden house. Naturally, they are worried that it may take some time for him to go back. Keshav Sen's mother and other ladies of the house are going there to have your darshan. Not finding you there, they may be disappointed and leave. Keshav had just died, if you remember. They had discussed about Keshav in the previous conversation. Keshav had departed from this mortal world many months ago. His venerable mother, wife and other ladies of his household are going to visit Thakur. Perhaps they had taken an appointment. So, Manilal Malik knew that, and he is reminding Thakur that we better leave now so that they will not be disappointed. They are going to visit you. Sri Ramakrishna says to Manilal Malik, "Wait a little, brother, I haven't had my nap. Besides, I can't do anything in a hurry." This quality you will find in Swami Vivekananda also. You see, when he was traveling in the West, especially when he was in America, he had to catch a lot of trains. And everywhere, these people, they were sticklers, especially in England. They were sticklers for timing and appointment and all those things. Naturally, because otherwise people keep waiting. But somehow, Swami Vivekananda and even Thakur, they could never be hurried. They could not be forced to do certain things. That's why Swamiji writes in his Karma Yoga, we always seem to be in a hurry to do so many things. Duty is always upon us. It is scorching our hearts. It's scorching our hearts because we can't do a thing in a very calm and collected manner. We can't enjoy the work we do. Neither can we enjoy even the enjoyments, even eating. Sometimes people have to just gobble up something and run away. They can't even enjoy their meal. So that so much of duty is upon us. Swamiji says in his duty is like the midday sun which is scorching our hearts. Because we have created so many duties, some self-created, some which are essential, but we have added so many things that it leaves us no time for any kind of any spare time to even contemplate or think of God, or to do things in a meaningful and a purposeful way. It is so difficult. If we have so many things to do, we will be spoiling all the things. So that's why Sri Ramakrishna says, besides, I can't do anything in a hurry. You can't just push me and say that I have to go. I will go in my own time, I will do things. That's how systematic Sri Ramakrishna was. We think that he was always in ecstasy, but at the same time, he had his own way of doing things. If they have gone there, what can I do about it? They will have a nice stroll in the garden and enjoy it. So, this is how you see, could not be, he remained unperturbed in all these things. After a little rest, Thakur is ready to leave for Dakshineshwar, but before leaving, he prays for the welfare of Surendra. He knew Surendra was a very, very close devotee, and you remember he was the one who also supported the disciples when they had no place to stay after Kashipur. He used to pay the rent for the Baranagar house and other things. He visits all the rooms one by one, softly repeating the name of God. He doesn't want to leave anything unfinished. Now you see how careful he is. He used to say that when we go to somebody's house who have arranged for such a big feast, has done such good karma, then it is a duty of the person who enjoys the benefit to do a little japa for him, or at least otherwise it is not justified. So he says he doesn't want to leave. Standing there, he says, I didn't eat luchis before, bring me a little now. He used to say that if you don't take, he used to at least ask for a glass of water. He says if a holy person leaves a place without taking anything, then it will, some harm may come to that family. So he was so much concerned. So though he perhaps did not have the need Many people did not understand this, but he said, I didn't eat luchis before, bring me a little now. So he just takes a little small piece of luchi, eats it, and then says, this means something. If I remembered, now he is explaining why he did that. If I remembered I had not eaten the luchi, I would want to come back for it. There are two things here. First is he did not want to leave this place without at least blessing Surendra in some way. Or maybe he wants to show that if you have some small desire, it should not be left unfulfilled, because that will keep your mind totally disturbed. So Mani Malik says that would have been nice. We too could have come with you. So they were just joking. They were taking it in a very gross way, in a very light way, thinking that he is hankering for a luchi like other worldly people. Anyway, so all the devotees laugh, and then we come to the next conversation. This is a totally different place. Ishan, this famous Ishan. Ishan was a person who was a philanthropist, as all of you know, and Sri Ramakrishna refers to him many times. So Ishan Mukhopadhyay. So he is going there. It's a car festival. Wednesday, 25th June 1884, the second day of the bright fortnight of Ashada. At Ishan's invitation, Sri Ramakrishna has arrived this morning at his house in the Thantania district of Calcutta. Upon arrival, Thakur has come to know that Pandit Shashadhar is staying nearby with the Chatterjees on College Street. He is very keen. Shashadhar Tarka Chudamani, who used to very often come to Dakshineshwar, used to frequent Dakshineshwar. So it is decided that he will go to see him in the evening. So he has arranged everything. See, he used to keep a tab on everything. When he visited, he used to find out which is the place I am going. Is there anybody who is special there whom I can visit? So all his trips to Kolkata, which were arranged by these devotees, was he wanted to make it fruitful, utilize all the time and try to do many things. Thakur was so systematic. So he is very keen to meet. So he has decided, since Ishan's house is nearby, let me meet him also. It is now 10 o'clock in the morning. Sri Ramakrishna is sitting with the devotees in Ishan's ground floor parlor with some Brahmins from Bhattapada. One of them a Bhagavad Pandit. Hajra and two devotees have come with Thakur. Ishan's sons, one of them Shrish, and a devotee who worships Shakti and wears a vermilion mark on his forehead are also there. Thakur has a sense of humor. Seeing the vermilion mark, he laughs and says, oh, he is branded. That means Shaktas used to wear in a particular the mark on the forehead in a particular way. Vaishnavas, just to distinguish themselves from the Shaktas, they used to have a different type of tilak. So everybody had his own. Shaivites, for example, in the south used to have it cross like this, and some will have it straight. So many things, insignia and these marks were used. And Thakur says this is a brand, they are all branded. After a while, Narendra and M arrive from their Calcutta homes. After saluting Thakur, they sit beside him. Thakur had told M previously, I will be going to Ishan's house on a certain date. You go to and bring Narendra with you. So this is the Rath Yatra day. Thakur says to M, the other day I wanted to go to visit your house. Where do you live? Since M has just come, M, sir, now I live in Teliapada. No, this is on 1884, so it is a long time, but still Thakur knew that M had changed his house. So he lives in Telipada in Shampukur near the school where he taught. Perhaps it was Morton School. Sri Ramakrishna, did you not go to school today? Sir, the school is closed for car festival, though it was a weekday where Sri Ramakrishna did not expect him. Then he says, since the death of Narendra's father, now Narendra's father has passed away. There have been great problems in his family. Narendra is the eldest of several brothers and sisters. His father had been a lawyer, but had not saved anything. He was very generous, and a lot of people had taken advantage of his generosity, and in the process he perhaps had not saved a lot of money. So, and then there was a suit filed by the relatives claiming that house to be their own. So, Thakur had asked Ishan, Narendra is now looking for a job to meet the family's expenses. You might be aware that after his father passed away, suddenly they were, because they had a big house and a lawsuit to fight, so they needed money, and Narendra had to go from school to school, from place to place to get a job. So Thakur had asked, Thakur was so concerned that to see him suffering so much, so he had asked Ishan and some other devotees to help him find a job. Ishan is a superintendent in the Comptroller General's office. Thakur's worries whenever he hears of Narendra's family problems. So once even Narendra was terribly upset because Thakur used to tell everybody that he is suffering and do something. He was so keen to help him, which Narendra's pride, he had a self pride. He did not like, why is Thakur telling everybody of my problems? I can try to handle it myself. So he complains to Sri Ramakrishna. Then Sri Ramakrishna tells him something very significant, which shows how much love he had for Narendra. He says, for you I can go begging from door to door. So that was his feeling, that he knew that he is one who is going to take my message all over the world, and how can mother or Mahamaya give him so much of suffering, because if he suffers, then that will be very bad. So Sri Ramakrishna is telling Narendra, I have spoken to Ishan about you. He was at the Kali temple at Dakshineshwar one day. I spoke to him then. He knows many people. So he is hoping that Ishan might perhaps use his influence to give him a job. In addition to Thakur, Ishan has invited many friends for the occasion. Songs will be sung to the accompaniment of banya, tabla and tanpura. And one member of the family has brought very fine flour for the pakhavaj. Pakhavaj, they have to apply flour mixed with water so that the right sound comes. It has to be tuned before it is played. At about 11, Ishan asked Narendra to sing. That was one of the main items, because everybody knew he could sing. Sri Ramakrishna to Ishan, just fine flour. Then it will be quite some time until our meal is ready. I mean, Thakur is just joking. And Ishan said, no sir, it won't take long. Some of the devotees laugh. A scholar well versed in Bhagavata laughs as he recites an uncommon couplet not written in any book. After reciting the couplet, he explains that couplet is given here as a footnote. Kavyam darshanam hanti kavyena gitena hanyate gitancha istri vilasena sarve hanti bubukshuta. This is of course not from the Bhagavata, but a very uncommon couplet, which sometimes the Bhagavata Pandits, uncommon in the sense they always are on the lookout for some jokes. And these jokes are just to see that if people get bored by some of the philosophical discussions, when they see that reaction on the faces of people, they just crack these jokes. So the meaning of this is, it's a beautiful meaning. Of course, the meaning is given here. Poetry is more pleasing than philosophy. That's what the verse means. When poetry is recited or heard, schools of philosophy such as Vedanta, Sankhya, Nyaya, Patanjali seems dry. He's just giving a comparison that the common people prefer songs and kirtan and other things because that is more pleasing. Though it may not be more useful, but at the same time Vedanta and other things being dry and being difficult to understand, people would rather prefer the simple thing. That's the idea. All seem dry, but music is more attractive than even poetry. Reciting a poetry is very good, but if somebody can set it to tune and sing it, it's much more, people would like it more. Then again, if a beautiful woman passes by, the poetry is forgotten and the song loses its flavor. So he is saying how worldly people start with philosophy, or maybe they like to do certain things, but as time passes, when they find these things are difficult and really not only difficult, they have to leave the comfort zone, then they go in for less difficult things, more pleasurable things, more gross things, so that they can satisfy themselves. And finally he says the whole mind goes to, but when you are hungry, that is the ultimate thing, then you even forget that. Then you want neither poetry nor song nor woman. The thought of food is all consuming. So hunger is something which even a big scholar, when he is totally hungry, that's why they say even the stomach, religion cannot be practiced on an empty stomach. That is one of the basic urges which make a man bound to the body. So Sri Ramakrishna, he is witty indeed, because hearing Sri Ramakrishna talk about luchi, because he saw just fine flour, I mean he is just joking, all this atta was just to, the flour was used to use it as a paste for the pakhavaj, but what about the luchis? So this Bhagavad Kathakar perhaps remembered this verse, saying that when a person is hungry, all his philosophy, desire to listen to poetry and all those things, and even songs, they will neither want that, and the thought of food is so all consuming. So the pakhavaj is tuned. Narendra begins to sing. Thakur goes upstairs to the drawing room overlooking the road for a rest. M. Shirish accompany him. Kshetranath Chatterjee, Ishan's father-in-law, had built that room. So the time is over. So we conclude now, and we'll begin from this in the next class. Of course, next class we are having Swamiji's birthday, so we will not be having the gospel class. And as I said, on 19th we will begin at 9:30 or 10, and there will be prasad in the afternoon as well. So those who can come in the morning, they can come. Some of them prefer to come in the morning, but we can't have pujas in both the sessions. Morning puja will be there, very simple puja, but that will be much before 9:30. So that day we will do early, isn't it, the puja, the morning, so that 3 o'clock puja or 4 o'clock puja, on special puja on Swamiji will be held as usual. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti.